Why doesn't Sony just give us a new Wipeout? Seriously, the series is still beloved, speedrunning communities are active, the soundtrack still goes unbelievably hard, and yet here we are. It's been years since the last meaningful entry in the franchise, but as they say, when one door closes, indie developers, well, they open a window. Enter Millennium Runners, developed by Over the Games and recently released out of early access on Steam. At first glance, this is unapologetically a Wipeout-inspired racer. Futuristic craft? Check. Neon-drenched galaxy-spanning tracks? Check. Electronic soundtrack that makes you feel like you're qualifying for an interstellar championship? Yeah, that's here too. It's a game that clearly understands the assignment, but the real question is, does it deliver on that assignment and get a good mark? After spending some time with Millennium Runners across multiple modes, playing with settings, battling AI rubber banding, and trying to shake off a blur-induced headache or two, I can say this. Millennium Runners has heart, it has speed, and it has style. But it also has problems, so let's break it down. So yeah, Millennium Runners, it doesn't hide its influences. This is not a subtle homage, it wears its inspiration proudly, and honestly I think that works in its favour. You choose from a roster of futuristic teams, each piloting anti-grav vehicles that look like they were designed in a neon-lit aerospace lab many years in the future. The game features multiple race modes, classic race, Grand Prix, time attack, and a structured progression system in the style of a career mode that gives you reason to keep pushing forward. It aims to be a defining racer of the century. And that's ambitious, and ambition is good. The handling, at its best, feels responsive and fairly intuitive. You're not fighting the vehicle constantly, turns are manageable. Sure, it takes some getting used to, and for someone with reaction times like mine, it can be quite challenging, but it's manageable. The boost pads feel rewarding, and when you enter this rhythm of gliding through corners, managing your speed, threading tight track sections, Millennium Runners captures that Wipeout energy really well. You feel fast, and that's crucial, because if a futuristic racer like this doesn't make you feel like you're breaking the laws of physics, what's the point in playing? So let's talk about the most important thing in any racing game. How it feels. Millennium Runners does a respectable job here. The hovercraft control scheme is smooth, and drifting through turns is manageable once you adjust to the weight. There's a slight learning curve, particularly in tighter track segments, but it never feels fundamentally broken. I mean, yeah, you're going to hit some walls, probably quite a lot, especially if you're me, but that's honestly part of the genre. Anti-grav racers are about pushing the limit, scraping a wall because you overcommitted to a corner at like 300 miles per hour. That's just tradition at this point. What impressed me most is the sense of speed scaling between vehicles. Some teams feel heavier but stable, others are twitchier but faster. The differences aren't night and day, but they're noticeable enough to encourage experimentation and changing out your vehicles. However, I do wish there were slightly more personality between teams mechanically. The backstories are there, but let's be honest, most players won't dive deep into lore for a hover racing team unless it affects gameplay meaningfully. Still, when the controls click, Millennium Runners delivers a legitimately fun loop. You boost, you dodge, you weave through glowing corridors of sci-fi architecture, you chase lap times, and that's the magic, honestly. Now, before we go any further, if you're enjoying this video or you're just a big fan of racing games in general, then please consider hitting that subscribe button and tapping the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. And if you haven't done so already, please consider hitting that like button as well. It helps out a lot more than you probably think. Anyway, let's talk about the track design, because this is where the experience, in my opinion, becomes a little bit inconsistent. Some tracks are really good. They twist vertically, demand precise control, and reward repetitive memorization. These are the courses that make you lean forward in your chair, but then there are other courses as well, and they're just kind of there. Flat, less imaginative, missing that sense of escalating tension. It almost feels like two design philosophies collided. One group wanted technical punishing tracks that test mastery, and the others wanted safe layouts that just provide a little bit of variety, I guess. Variety is good, but when placed next to stronger designs, weaker tracks stand out a lot more. In a genre built on spectacle and difficulty, average tracks feel more disappointing than they probably would in a traditional racer. You will absolutely develop favourites, and you may find yourself skipping certain tracks. That said though, the visual themes are solid, the futuristic aesthetic works, neon lights streak past, massive planetary backdrops loom in the distance. There's a genuine attempt to create a galaxy-spanning racing league. The art direction isn't the problem, it's just consistency. Let's talk about the actual performance of the game, because this is where things get a bit complicated. Millennium Runners struggles, technically. On one machine, a race runs smooth, on another, frame pacing issues, lag spikes, and in some cases I've seen reports of crashes depending on hardware and settings. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't exactly have a NASA supercomputer, and I'll drop my specs in the description below, but for me the game was struggling to run a bit on high settings. Not on ultra, on high. I had to put it down to medium. I mean, it's not exactly a groundbreaking game in terms of visuals, that just seems like an optimization issue to me. I don't know, it just shouldn't feel like a science experiment just to get stable performance on some modestly decent hardware. And that blur effect, man, let's just talk about that for a second. There is a heavy blur effect baked into the presentation. I understand why it exists. Developers want to amplify speed, they want that sensation of velocity, they want streaking lights and distortion to sell the fantasy. But the issue is it's kinda headache inducing. After a few races, especially on certain tracks, the blur just settles into your peripheral vision. Instead of enhancing immersion, it just becomes distracting. And for some it may even be uncomfortable. Thankfully you can play around with the motion blur, but there is always a kind of blur there regardless of toggling that up or down. And then there's the AI, and unfortunately this is another pain point for me. Rubber banding is present, as is the case with many racing games, and it is noticeable. You can race flawlessly, build a significant lead, and suddenly an opponent is right up your arse as if physics politely stepped aside. Rubber banding as a design choice is a bit of a double-edged sword. Some would argue it keeps races exciting, but others would see it more as just pointless artificial difficulty. In Millennium Runners, it kinda crosses over into frustration territory. It doesn't always feel earned when an opponent overtakes you at the last moment with a suspiciously large amount of momentum. Competitive tension is great, artificial catch-up mechanics that lead to a cheated victory, less so. If AI tuning were adjusted, especially in the higher difficulties, the game would feel significantly more rewarding. Now let's swing back to some positives. Millennium Runners in its full release does not skimp on modes. You've got classic races, Grand Prix circuits, time attack if you're a leaderboard chaser. There's enough structure here to justify replaying tracks and experimenting with different vehicles, and for a game that costs about £10, that's pretty good value. You're not paying AAA prices here, this is indie tier pricing with indie ambition. And when you consider that, the content package feels fair. Would more tracks be welcome? Of course, but what's here isn't bare bones, it's just a little bit uneven. If there's one area where Millennium Runners absolutely nails it, it's the soundtrack. The electronic music selection is really good. I absolutely adore F-Zero, especially for its music, and especially F-Zero GX, and you probably hear that loads in my videos, so it's nice to have some new music of that kind of style here. High energy beats, pulsing synths, that classic anti-grav racing vibe that makes you want to shave milliseconds off of every lap. With headphones on, the experience elevates. The engine sounds, the boost effects, and the environmental audio complement the music nicely. This is one area where I would say Millennium Runners genuinely rivals its inspiration. And honestly, the soundtrack alone may carry some of you through the game's rough patches. It certainly did me. That's how good I think it is. So at about £10, Millennium Runners occupies an interesting space. If this were a £40, £50 game, the performance issues and inconsistencies would be much harder to forgive. At this price point though, it just becomes a question of tolerance. Are you desperate for a new Wipeout style experience? Do you enjoy indie races with some rough edges, and are you okay with tweaking settings quite a lot? If yes, you'll likely find enjoyment here. If you expect polished plug-and-play smoothness across all hardware, then you'll probably be a little bit disappointed. But here's the thing, games like Millennium Runners exist because there's a void left by dormant franchises. When the major publishers step away from niche but beloved genres, well, that's where the indie developers step in, and that alone deserves some recognition. Over the Games clearly understands what makes anti-grav racers special. It's not a lazy clone, it's a passionate attempt, and passion shows, but passion also needs polish. With some performance optimization, some AI adjustments, Millennium Runners could evolve into something truly special. The foundation is there, it just needs some reinforcement. So it's not the second coming of Wipeout, but it doesn't have to be. It's a scrappy, ambitious indie racer that gets the feeling of speed right, delivers a killer soundtrack, and offers a respectable amount of content for a budget price. It struggles with technical hiccups, some heavy blur effects, uneven track design, and yes, frustrating AI behaviour. It has momentum, but it just needs some smoothing over. So that takes us to the end of our look at Millennium Runners. Please let me know in the comments down below, what did you think about this game? Are you planning on picking it up? Have you played it already? Share all your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is thanks, and goodbye.